What is this? You just punched me, your fist isn't a weapon, it's nothing special!
Exactly. Bravery's not special. But that means everybody has it.
Then it's just like madness.
Let me paint a picture for you. You're watching an anime and you're absolutely obsessed with it. You post about it on Twitter, talk to your friends about it, and look up silly memes based on it. You love this anime with every fiber of your being. And as you finally reach that final episode, all of the excitement, anticipation, and suspense you felt for that anime suddenly vanishes. And you stare at the television with an empty expression on your face as you think to yourself, what did I just watch? And as the days go by, you find that a sort of empty feeling begins to pervade you. Where once all you were thinking about was how excited you were to watch the next episode, now you have a deep feeling of disappointment, or maybe even a longing for an ending that was never meant to be. I found that this is incredibly common with anime. You'll hear about how some of the most promising or iconic series were marred by their endings. Naruto, Jujutsu Kaisen, and of course the most iconic anime of all time, How I Met Your Mother. What do you mean he ends up with Robin? All of this build up, 9 seasons, 208 episodes, and it's just Robin? Oh, wait, that's not an anime. Naturally, a question surfaces. Can an anime's ending ruin said anime? I'll save my own thoughts on this for later on in the video. For now, I just want to observe what I've heard from other people on this subject. And I will say, the reasoning isn't lost on me. I mean, the ending for your narrative is an incredibly important element. It's the note that you're leaving your audience on, and one of the things that your story is going to be most remembered for. I feel like this is one of the biggest reasons why so many anime with bad endings tend to just get discarded, because most everyone is going to be remembering how awful the ending was. The best way I can describe it is if you took that really cute girl from work out on a date. You know, you have a lot of the same interests, you went and saw a movie, got a really nice dinner, and had a few laughs on the way home. And right as you're dropping her off for the night, you notice that she's leaning in. She's about to give you that final goodnight kiss, and you just let out the most massive fart of your entire life. And you know, like, it's awful. You can smell the blooming onion you just had at Outback. Everything gets really silent and awkward, and then you just kind of get in your car and leave. Like, yeah, the rest of the night was good, but you're only ever going to be remembering the fart. That's kind of what it feels like to be disappointed by an anime's ending. You enjoy it for the most part until the very end, when the anime decides to take a big fart all over you. However, while I've noticed there is a pretty big consensus that an anime's ending can ruin a show's legacy, I've also noticed that an anime's ending might suck for a whole slew of different reasons. Before we get into this, I just want to give everyone a spoiler warning. We're going to be talking about a good number of endings here. However, I've made it a point to not go into detail on a series ending if that ending hasn't been animated yet. I'll still talk about them, but I won't go into as much detail so I don't ruin any upcoming anime for anyone. So with that said, the first point I'd like to talk about is when the ending is filler or anime original. Now, that's not to say that the ending sucks just because it's original to the anime. For example, look at the 2003 version of Fullmetal Alchemist. In the past, I've expressed that I'm not really the biggest fan of the 2003 version or its ending, and there's a good number of people who share that same sentiment. But there's also a lot of people that actually really enjoy this ending and find it to be very thematically fitting for this version of the show, which I can't really necessarily disagree with. So I don't really think that I can say it's objectively bad or anything. However, if you do want an ending that I think is just bad altogether, then we need to talk about Soul Eater's anime ending, where Maka defeats the main villain with, I kid you not, a courage punch that comes out of nowhere. After this, Ashura just kind of explodes and dies, and then it just kind of ends. It's just really underwhelming, and I imagine it's because the people in charge of writing the anime's ending just didn't know how to conclude it. And that's the issue with original anime endings. They feel like they have a strong base to work off of with the manga source material, but the second it starts to deviate, it gets really messy. It becomes apparent that it's just kind of two stories glued together. However, that's not to say that a messy or unsatisfying ending is exclusive to meddling in the anime version, because the ending written by the original author is just as capable of disappointing its audience. I found that this is the case for a lot of shonen series like Bleach, Jujutsu Kaisen, and Promised Neverland. The manga for Promised Neverland, though the anime was bad too. I won't go into details on specific plot points here as to not spoil people, but the gist of it is that while these series start out very strong and become iconic critical darlings in their own right, eventually they begin to get sloppier and sloppier until it feels like the author doesn't exactly know how to end the story in a natural or satisfying way. And so it just kind of fizzles out unceremoniously. And I imagine this is because in many cases the narrative just isn't fully thought out beforehand, and sometimes the stresses of writing a weekly shonen manga can wear you down significantly to where it's much more difficult to keep the quality of the story consistent. Of course, you have exceptions like One Piece where it feels like almost everything was planned out ahead of time, but again, that's an exception. I mean, even famed Dragon Ball author Akira Toriyama has made it clear that he largely made up the entire plot of the manga as he went along. In that case though, it just so happened to work out. It really just comes down to how creative and good at improvising an author is. That being said, I do feel like there are times when even being overly creative can be a detriment to a story's ending. Now, I know that might sound weird. After all, good stories are usually built on a foundation of creativity. However, that doesn't mean you shouldn't be keeping certain ideas in check, because sometimes it might lead to your story veering off course or just completely going off the rails. A great example of this is unnecessary twist endings. And I personally feel as though this is one of the biggest ways that you can ruin a story. Look no further than something like Naruto Shippuden. Now, Naruto had been suffering from what I talked about previously, where it felt like the quality of the writing was getting poorer and poorer over time. But what really stood out as a major disappointment was the final reveal that Madara was basically just a pawn being used by the true villain Kaguya, who at that point really didn't have much build up at all. She was basically just mentioned once within that same arc. And unfortunately, her reveal felt kind of contrived and unnatural in comparison to Madara, who at that point had been foreshadowed since the beginning of Shippuden and very much felt like the main villain. This was a case where the predictable outcome would have made more narrative sense and probably would have satisfied a lot more people. Then you have a show like Attack on Titan where it feels like people are a bit more split on the ending's twist. And I kind of feel the same way. I think the idea of Eren transferring from the protagonist to the antagonist was just amazing. But when it's revealed why he does this, I can see how it can be viewed as a bit contrived, sloppy, or even undermines what felt like a really unique character arc in comparison to what you see in other big-name shonens. Despite this, I can still see why Isayama was going for, and when you consider that a large theme of Attack on Titan is the value of an individual's freedom, it does feel all the more meaningful that Eren was willing to sacrifice everything so his friends could have a chance at that freedom. It might have not been presented in a way that makes the most sense, but I can still appreciate the sentiment all the same. Of course, that's not the only issue that people had with Attack on Titan's ending. There was also the fact that people felt like there were still a few things that went a bit unexplored or underdeveloped. And that also seems to be kind of a big issue, especially with some of the newer series. Of course, Jujutsu Kaisen is a textbook example of this, but even I feel this way with a show as critically acclaimed as Demon Slayer. Now, the Demon Slayer anime isn't finished yet, and I don't even think Demon Slayer is bad. In fact, it's one of my favorite animes right now. But to this day, I do kind of feel like the series rushes to its ending a bit. And I really would have liked at least one more arc before the Hashira training arc, just because I feel like the series has such great characters, and fleshing them out as much as possible is really only a good thing. Again, it doesn't ruin the story or anything, but I do think a bit more development would have made the ending a bit more impactful. So really, I guess the answer to the question, can a bad ending ruin an anime, is a bit complicated. But for what it's worth, here are my 2 cents on the subject. I personally subscribe to the mindset that sometimes the journey is more important than the destination. And I know that not everyone is going to agree with that, which is fine. I mean, when a story has a perfect ending, it just makes it feel all the more special. Like this thing you love is going out gracefully as opposed to just dying an unremarkable death. But I have to admit, as disappointing as something like the ending to Naruto, Jujutsu Kaisen, or even the anime version of Soul Eater is, I can't lie and say that I still don't remember them fondly or get a little bit excited when I see them on TV or something. Because I just really love the characters, and despite the fact that those characters are associated with an ending that isn't great, I still really appreciate them regardless. Like, Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood could have the worst ending of all time, and yet I'd still have incredibly fond memories of the world and characters because I just really cherish the time that I got to spend with them. So I guess the point of this video is that the extent to which a bad ending can ruin a show is really up to the individual, but also I don't think that a bad ending can completely wash away the great memories that a show can create.